Often when I'm in conversation with people, like at dinner, I love to ask questions. And one of the questions I love to ask is, what's the best advice that you ever received and who gave it to you? And the best advice that I ever received was when I graduated from college, and I sat down with my father and I asked him to just give me what he thought would be the best career advice. How can I just do well? And I'll never forget, he said, John, 3 things. If you'll do these 3 things, I promise you'll do well. And what he shared with me that day, I have carried with me my entire life. And every time I teach, every time I write, every time I lead, he said, John, every day value people, because most people go through life and they've not been truly valued. Because they've not been truly valued, sometimes they don't even have the value that they have for themselves that they should have. So he said, lift people by letting them see not only who they are, which is already valuing people, but who they can become. He said, believe in people. Just look at people and believe the best, think the best, receive the best. He said, always stay in the best with people. He said, we are all human. Every one of us have our worst side. Wow. I mean, let's just talk about it for a moment, that there's probably a day in your life and in my life that we hope nobody ever knows about. I mean, we don't always operate on top level, but my father taught me that the best way to get people to live the best life is to believe in them. And then thirdly, he said, and this is the clincher, he said, unconditionally love them. He said, I could almost promise you, as you speak, as you lead, as you write, I can almost promise you that the person that you are communicating with has never been unconditionally loved. I mean, just loved, period. No strings attached. But he said, if you'll unconditionally love them, they'll immediately feel it. They'll experience it. And he said, John, you will be a people magnet. People will want to be around you because no one else gives them that unconditional love feeling. Incredible advice. We've all heard this statement that people will forget what you said. They'll even maybe forget what you did. But they won't forget how you made them feel. Unconditional love makes people feel something that no other way or other person can ever be given to them. It's a fact. And so I took my dad's advice, and I just value people, believe in people, unconditionally love them. I do that for you, but I do that for everyone. And I have found that that was the greatest advice I've ever received, and hopefully it'll help you. I'm sure it will. The second lesson that my father taught me, this is a faith lesson, but this is an incredible teaching, is he taught me to pray without ceasing. In other words, continually pray. I shared with you earlier that many of the lessons my father taught me were more his actions than his words. And this is one of them for sure, that if you grew up around my father, Melvin Maxwell, one thing that you very quickly caught was that he had an ongoing conversation with God. And I love that phrase, ongoing conversation with God. You see, a lot of my faith friends, they would set aside time, which I think is good, to spend with God. And my father said, that's good, son. But he said, why would you just take a little bit of time and just spend it with him when, in honesty, you could spend all day with him? He never leaves you. He never forsakes you. He sticks closer to you than a brother. He always is ready to hear you, listen to you, minister to you, add value to you. So he said, John, just have an ongoing conversation with him. My father taught me to make prayer, instead of something that is formal and something that maybe has a box or a place, he just taught me to talk to God. Sentence prayers, not long. In fact, many times as my father would walk around the house, he would just say things like, God, I just really appreciate how. And I would just listen to him, and then he would move on to something else. And those sentence prayers throughout the day shared with me and showed me that he did something with what one of the old saints, Thomas à Kempis, would say. He practiced the presence of God. I learned to do that. And I can tell you that is the greatest spiritual asset in my life. I have ongoing, continual conversations with God. Not formal, not long, not complicated, just from my heart. Where I am, what I'm thinking, what I'm seeing, what I'm encountering at that moment. And I have found great spiritual relief and developed great spiritual muscle in just knowing that he's right beside me. And by the way, he's right beside you too. In fact, I have had many of my wonderful friends who, some of them don't even believe in God, and they'll say, well, you mean he's beside me? Yeah, he's beside you. See, he's beside you whether you believe in him or not. It's like I told one of my dear, wonderful, one of my favorite atheist friends, I just said, I know you don't believe in God, but you sure do miss him, don't you? Of course you miss him. You were created to know him. You were created to spend time with him. And my Father teaching me to pray without ceasing, invaluable in my spiritual journey with him. It's a lesson that I'll carry with me all my life. It's a lesson he taught me, but now, today, truthfully, it's a lesson that I live. The third area that my father just really helped me in, and a lesson that was invaluable to me, was the fact that my dad taught me to be consistent. My father was always the same. He had good days, he had bad days, circumstances that were up, circumstances that were down. But he was steady. He was faithful. In fact, sometimes when I think of my father, if somebody just said you could only describe him in one word, I would probably debate between the word faithful and the word consistent. And yet I can really clump them together, and so can you. If faithful is consistent, and consistent is faithful. And he was consistent in not only his words but his deeds. He had great integrity in the fact that what he said is what he did, and what he did is what he said. So he never sent our family. He never sent us curveballs. We didn't look at him and say, "What just happened there? Oh my, that doesn't seem like Dad." Now, let me just also say that my dad was human. So I'm not in any way wanting to make him a saint. In fact, I can promise you he taught me a lot of great lessons. But all the lessons he taught me weren't maybe the best lessons. So let me just give you one real quick. My father taught me how to drive fast, okay? My dad liked to speed. My brother likes to speed. My sister likes to speed. I like to speed. I'm sorry. We learned that from my dad. My dad, every other year, would buy a car. It was a ritual. Every 2 years, Dad would go down and buy a car. And we loved to go with him when he bought the car because two things. We knew it wouldn't take long. My dad made decisions very quickly. And secondly, we knew that as soon as he bought the car, we'd get in the back seat and he would take us out to Route 22, heading west out of Circleville, Ohio. And he'd turn around to the back seat, he'd look at the kids, and he'd say, "Kids, let's see what she's got." He'd put that accelerator to the floor, and we'd take off on that little straight road. And he'd get it up to 100 miles an hour, and he'd let off the gas and kind of pull over and turn around and smile at the kids and say, "I think we got a good one. Let's take it home." That was a ritual every other year, and my father, he had a heavy foot. So I'm telling you that because I just want you to know when I'm talking about all the incredible qualities that he had some humanness to him also. He wasn't a perfect man, never even pretended to be a perfect man. He was an authentic man, not a perfect man. But when I look at my father, most of the lessons I'm going to teach you are incredibly positive and uplifting. And I just want you to know that he had a human side too. He wasn't a saint. Close. He wasn't a saint. But he taught us to be consistent. And his consistency was rooted in the fact that he had a set of values that he greatly valued. And he had a set of principles that he always followed. And those principles just kept him going straight. And those values, and some of the principles, by the way, some of the values I'll be teaching you in these 3 lessons on my tribute to my father. But those principles helped him to go straight, and those values helped him to stay solid. And so therefore, when I saw my dad, everything was congruent. Everything matched up. It's been a great lesson for me because I feel that consistency is something that is an incredible way to live, but I think so many times it's kind of overlooked. I mean, we seldom get a consistency award, and I suppose if we did, it's not a sexy word. I suppose if we did get a consistency award, we might be a little ticked and say, "Come on, can't you think of better words or adjectives for me, like genius or brilliant or charismatic?" I mean, consistency is it's a great word. It's a solid word, but it's not the one we strive for. When you ask people, what do you want to be in life? Very few people are going to say, I want to be consistent. And yet, as I watched my father live for 98 years and 8 months, let me tell you what I know about consistency. It compounds. Trust me. If you are consistently good, you consistently compound goodness. And it gets better and better and better. That's a fact. I had a conversation one day with my dad. He was probably about 90. And we were talking in his office at his home. And he said, John, he said, isn't it wonderful? The older you get, the more a person loves people. He said, it's just been wonderful. I'm getting older, but I love more people. I love people more today than I did 20 years ago. He said, isn't it wonderful that as you get older, you just love people more? And I said, Dad, that's not true. I know a whole bunch of people. I'll bet you do too. I know a lot of people. They're getting older and they're not loving people more. Hey, they're getting older, but they're not getting better. Now, it was true for my father because there's a principle here that I want to teach. It's about consistency. He loved people when he was young. He loved people in his middle age. He loved people when he retired. You see, my father, every step of the journey, loved people. Now, here's what I know. If you have a good quality within you, as you get older, that quality expands, it exaggerates, because one of the things that happens with aging is exaggeration. And so the qualities I have in me, if they're good, they grow and exaggerate in a positive way. And the qualities I have within me, if they're negative and bad, they also grow and exaggerate, but they grow and exaggerate in a negative way. In my book, Today Matters, which is sometimes entitled Make Today Count, I talk about the fact that that I have disciplines in my life, what I call the daily 12 disciplines. And I talk about in the book how that I think it was 3 or 4 of those disciplines I literally learned as a teenager, and about 3 or 4 others in my 20s. And I talk about when I learned these and to practice these important disciplines in my life. But the one that I learned last, the one that I worked on and fixed and improved last was my own health. And I didn't even work on it until I was 51 and I had a heart attack. I was always I thought, a healthy person. I wasn't a sickly person, that was for sure. And when I had a heart attack at 51, I had a big wake-up call, and all of a sudden I realized, John, you have to live a more healthy lifestyle. You're falling short here. So that was the last maybe good habit I formed, and I didn't form it until 51. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Of all the daily disciplines I have in my life, do you know what today is my most difficult discipline? Healthy lifestyle, eating right, exercising. Why? Because for 51 years, I didn't do it. Now, it's the point that I'm making on consistency, that the earlier we become consistent in good habits, the more those good habits compound in a positive way, just as if I'm consistent in bad habits, they compound in a negative way. And my father taught me the value of good habits and living this incredible, unbelievable, consistent life. The next lesson, wow. The next lesson that I learned that just is one of the most important to me, and it's another faith lesson, so just be patient with me, is my father showed me how to share my faith in a positive way with other people. And I think the key is share my faith in a positive way, because there are a lot of people, to be honest with you, they don't do it right. And the whole foundation of my father teaching me how to share my faith in a positive way was based on the fact that he said, John, every person, they're created by God. And he said they intuitively want to know God. I mean, after all, he's their creator. He said the reason that they don't know God is because they have a wrong picture of God. And he said as soon as you share with them who God really is, and they begin to understand that with all of his goodness and all of his attributes, they'll want to know him. It's kind of like I share with people all the time, the best networking question you can ask someone is, who do you know that I should know? Well, my father loved for people to ask him that question, who do you know that I should know? Because he'd say, oh, you need to know my Heavenly Father. And he passed that on to me. And I have found that his words and his actions in sharing faith are exactly true. That people really do want to know God. They just have a wrong picture of God. And to be honest with you, if I had a wrong picture of God, I wouldn't want to know him. I think the first step in a good relationship is to know who a person really is. And if that person is a good person, you want to engage in that relationship and grow and build it. Well, it's the same way with God. Once you understand his care for you, his unconditional love for you, his forgiveness for you, I mean, my goodness. If you just took the attributes of God and just kind of stacked them up and say, would you like to know this person? The answer would be yes, 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 of course. And so my dad just shared with me and taught me how to be positive with people. And by the way, in sharing your faith, the first thing you do, more than value your faith, is you value the person again. It all comes back to valuing people. And the moment that I value you, I'm going to want to share what I call good news with you. And good news is that God loves you, has a plan for your life, and wants you to have even a better and greater life than you even want for yourself. And once you know him, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I'm going to stop here just for a second, because if I have in any way, what should I say, piqued your interest, I would like you to do something for me when I'm done maybe with this tribute to Dad, these few lessons I'm teaching in my first session. We're going to do 3 of them. I want you to go to maxwellfaith.com, because you're going to see me share with you visually the 4 pictures of God. What I've just talked about if you have the right picture of God, I think you'll want to know him. And I would just encourage you on your own time, go to maxwellfaith.com and just observe and listen. And if you decide to have a relationship with God, I just want you to know that our team will, there'll be a way for you to get involved with us for a moment, just briefly, and our team will get hold of you. And they will give you an opportunity, if you want, to just give you free resources, no strings attached, none at all. But if you're really interested in a relationship with God and having this incredible forgiveness peace, etc., then just go to maxwellfaith.com and you'll learn what to do to follow through, and we'll be able to put in your hands in a very short time some great material, a study guide, and then a special surprise for you that I think will just really help you grow in your faith. Okay. My father taught me, this is lesson, I think, number 5. My father taught me to stay focused. To stay focused. I've said often that what you focus on expands. I learned it from my dad. I wrote a book called Intentional Living That book is my father. My father lived intentional. He realized that good intentions were not enough. You had to have good actions. And so intentional living is the bridge from good intentions to good actions. And my father stayed focused. My friend Dan Ryland talks about that. I love the phrase that Dan gave me recently. He said, pick a rabbit. Pick a rabbit. We've all heard that, the thing that if you chase two rabbits, both of them get away. Of course, you're double-minded, and I'll go for this one. And while you're hesitating, they're both down the hole. Pick a rabbit. My father knew how to pick a rabbit, and he was intentional in his priorities and in his life. I could give you so many examples of this, but I'm just going to share with you one. My father, this is interesting, my father did the grocery shopping in the family. My mom made the list out, and my father was kind of a guy of action, and he loved every Friday afternoon about 3, 4 o'clock going and getting the groceries. And he would take us with him, and we loved going to, that sounds crazy, the kids want to go to the grocery store, but you never went to the grocery store with my dad. If you went to the grocery store with my dad, it was a highlight. First of all, let's go back to focus for a moment. He would share with us, he'd say, kids, most people, they go to the store every day. He said, and I don't understand why they do that. Why don't they make a list and figure out what they need for the next few days and go once a week? He said, there's no need of getting in the car and going back and forth. He said, it makes no sense at all. Why don't you just prioritize, focus, and then do it all at one time? And that's how he did the grocery shopping, and we did it on Friday afternoon. And when we went to the grocery store, the reason we loved going to the grocery store with Dad is he would take the stuff off the shelf, and I'd have a cart, my brother Larry'd have a cart, and then he'd throw it to us. Oh, my goodness. Literally. He would get on one aisle, and we'd be on the other aisle. He'd throw it over the aisle, and we would catch it. We had so much fun. It was a blast. And yes, we had some broken ketchup bottles, and on the floor. And we'd have to get the manager and mop it up and clean it up and pay for the broken ketchup bottles. And that's what kept us going back, because we loved the grocery game. Now, my father understood that what you focus on expands, and so he said, go shopping once a week. But here's what he would say to us all the time. He'd say, kids, if it was important, he'd say, put it before you. And what he meant by put it before you is write it down. Write it down, put it before you. And then he wanted us really to put it on the mirror in our bathroom. Write it down, put it before you so you can see it all the time. What did he know? He knew that the more we saw maybe a quote or a thought or a statement, the more that statement would expand in our life. In fact, you'd say, put before you what you want to expand and put behind you what you want to shrink. So my dad was incredible, absolutely the very best in helping us learn how to focus in life. I just learned to pick a rabbit from him. This next lesson I'm going to share with you that Dad taught me was a life changer. There's hardly a day goes by in my life that this lesson doesn't come to play somewhere in my leadership journey, and that is Dad taught us to travel the high road. Now, in fact, he in traveling in life, he told us to take the high road, which means turn the other cheek, go the second mile. Be kind to people that aren't kind to you, and he, in fact, he said not only travel the high road, but he said travel high, travel long. And when he was talking about traveling long, he'd say go the second mile, and that's a old traditional biblical Jewish kind of a deal that in those days, that if somebody asked you to go with them, you would walk with them a mile. That was what you did. That's how you served people. But if you walked with them the second mile, it was totally voluntary. They had no right to ask you, nor you didn't have any obligation to do it. And so my father was a second mile man. He would always say, travel the second mile with people. He said, there's less traffic on the second mile. I love that. Less traffic on the second. On the first mile, under obligation and rules and legalism, a lot of traffic. Second mile, thins out pretty quick. So he'd say, travel the high road, be good to people that maybe aren't always good to you. And not only travel the high road, but travel long. Walk that second mile. And they also taught us to travel light. You'd think he's a travel agent, wouldn't you? Travel light. And what he meant by that is just don't carry a bunch of garbage. Don't carry a bunch of baggage. Let it go. If you're going to go mountain climbing, you don't ask the question, how much weight can I take to the top? You get rid of everything you possibly can that will be weight, so you can successfully get to the top. And my father said, you can't carry a bunch of baggage to the top of the success mountain. Forgive. Keep short accounts. It's okay. Let it go. Travel light, travel far, travel high. But it was in the high road. That's where life change really happened for me. My father was a president of a college. It's now High Christian University, and for several years. And he had on his college board 2 or 3 people that just thought it was their job to be a pain in his rear end. And honestly, they couldn't have grown the college. My father was very successful, built the college, grew it, I think, 5 times the original enrollment when he left the college, and it was just built a brand new campus, relocated it. Very successful, but he had about 3 or 4 board members that just thought it was their job to be a pain. And I knew about it because I really went to college where my dad was the president, and think about it for a moment. That's an IQ test. If you go to college where your father is the president, you increase the odds of maybe graduating from college. And so it was in my college years and in the great growing years of the school that he just got a lot of criticism from a few of his board members. And I would hear him and Mom talk about it, and it would make me angry. And I'd say, Dad, stand up. Don't let them do that to you. You're right. They're wrong. And I was kind of militant in the process. And my father would say, son, he said, I just listen. He said, I have the ability. I'm courageous. I stand up. But he said, I value people, and there's times when you just turn the other cheek and walk the high road. And I remember one night, my mother was the librarian. One night I was in the college library after hours. I had a key. Mom was the librarian. And I was clearing the back of the library just doing some study. And my father didn't know I was in the library, and he slipped into the library. It was at the end of a college board meeting. And he went clear back to a corner. He didn't see me, but he went back to a corner and knelt, and he started to pray. And my father prayed out loud. And as he prayed, he was greatly troubled over the board meeting and the difficulties that came out of it and the pain that some of these board members were causing him. And he was asking God to forgive them, and he was asking God to bless them. And I listened to my father pray probably for, 10, 12 minutes. And it changed my life. He never knew that night that I was in the library. He slipped out, and it wasn't until several years later we had a conversation. I said, Dad, I was in the library the night you prayed and asked God to bless people that were persecuting you, and they were just a pain to you. That totally revolutionized and changed my life. And I owe it all to Dad, because in leadership is difficult. I can promise you, you know this to be true, there are no 2 good consecutive days in a leader's life. Wow. Not 2. It's a pain to lead people. People are difficult. That's why you've got to love them. If you don't love them, you shouldn't lead them, because it's too difficult to lead people, difficult people, if you don't love them. But in leadership, traveling that high road, traveling high, traveling far, traveling light, life-changing for me. My dad taught me that lesson. And I hope what did I do? I don't know how many lessons I had. I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I only gave you 6 lessons. Okay. I'm going to have to go a little faster in tribute number 2. But I gave you 6, okay? And hopefully that'll help you. And you hang on because, again, every week I'm coming back to you with tribute number 2 to Dad and tribute number 3. And we'll just kind of learn some life lessons together. And it will be good for me because I'll get to talk to you about how I valued my father and how the lessons he taught me changed my life. And it's my hope that when you meet with me every week that some of those lessons will stick with you and it'll help you to be the person that I know you want to become. So thanks for being with me today, and we'll pick up and do tribute number 2 for Dad next week. When Dad was 88, and I had him come up onto the stage at a place where I was speaking, and I gave him a few minutes to talk about what he was doing and how he just encouraged, oh my gosh, a crowd of probably 6,000 or 7,000 people, and they were on their feet giving him a standing ovation. And I did that in the memorial service because I wanted people that didn't know him, they just hear me talk about him, just really get to see him in action. But he was a great, great encourager. One quick story. For a period of time, Margaret and I lived in a condominium, and in the condominium down at the bottom, they had a gym. And so I had a terrific physical trainer named Josephine, I called her Joe, that would meet me on a regular basis and take me through the paces of working out. And when my father came to visit us at the condo, he loved to go down to the gym with me, and because he loved Joe. And so when Dad was there, he'd say, "Are you going to the gym today, son?" "Yeah, I'm going, Dad." "Well, can I go?" "Oh, sure, you can go with me." But I knew that if Dad went with me, that she would begin me in my process of lifting weights and doing all the things I needed to do. And then within 5 minutes, she'd say, "Okay, John, start working your routine." And she'd leave me. Where is she going to go? She's going to go talk to Dad. And for the rest of the time, she'd be talking to Dad. I'd be over there going through the paces. She wasn't even looking at me. Because my father was such an incredible encourager. She loved to literally, quote, sit at his feet. And he would pour good stuff into her, belief into her, positivity into her. And there was more than one time, I'm over there, and I'm chopped liver, to be honest with you. Honest to God, she's listening to Dad. She's with Dad. She's not with me. And my father, one day, I looked over, and he's got his hand on the side of her head, and he's praying with her, and tears are just coming down her cheeks. And she just loved my father. Why? Because he was an encourager. I asked Dad one time. I said, "Dad, how do you know that people need encouragement?" Because he was encouraging everybody. I said, "How do you know they need to be encouraged?" He said, "Son, let me explain this to you. If they're breathing," I love this, "if they're breathing, they need to be encouraged." And that's exactly how my father lived his life. He called encouragement the oxygen of the soul. If you were around my dad, get ready to be encouraged. He didn't know how to have a conversation without saying things that would be positive and uplifting into your life. A great lesson that my father taught me. Another one, terrific lesson, was to work hard. My father was a very hard worker. In fact, he worked full time until 95. And he loved work. So work wasn't work to him. And it just literally came right down through the family. And for my brother, my sister, and myself, we all love to work. And work isn't work. And we find our mission, we find our passion, and it's just, we can hardly wait to do it. So he was an incredible example of working hard. But he also, in that working hard teaching he did, he taught us to work smart. It's not only how hard you work, but it's how smart you work. And one of the things that he did that was just very helpful, I think this helped me the most in the family because I was a fun-loving kid and not highly disciplined. I really wanted to do two things, play ball and be with my friends. And so my father would give me the chore list, and what he would do is he would give it to me at the beginning of the week and say, "John, here are the 5 things you need to do this week." And some of them I had to do every day, like take out the garbage. But then like clean the basement or wash the car. I didn't have to do that every day, but I had to do it that week. And my father would say, now, you can choose when you want to do this. If you want to, you can, in fact, if you got the list, you can go down and clean the basement now. You can go out and wash the car now. Or you can do it tomorrow. Or you can do it the next day. He said, you get to choose when you do that work. But he said, I just want you to know by Saturday at noon it has to be done. And they'd say, Saturday afternoon we're going to maybe go swimming. If you got your chores done, you can go swimming with us. But if your chore isn't done, you got to finish your chores. And I can still remember the day on Saturday afternoon when the rest of the family pulled out in the car, and I was at the front door watching them leave me because I hadn't cleaned the basement. And Dad said, well, you didn't prioritize your time, so you clean the basement, we'll go swimming. It was my dad that taught me how to pay now, play later. Huge teaching in my life. In fact, he said, let me tell you something. If you pay now, you'll get a play later. But if you just play now, you'll severely pay later. And he talked to me about how doing the right thing compounds into something positive and gives you options at the end. But if you don't do the first things first, you lose your options. And then toward the end of life, the payment really gets compounding and quite severe and difficult. And so my dad just came alongside of me and helped me to understand how to put first things first, how to work hard, how to prioritize my work, and pay now, play later. And it was an incredible lesson for me that just literally, it's just literally revolutionized my life. And to this day, I'm an early riser and I wake up early, and 5:30. I'm already getting my work done. In fact, my dad used just to say, John, it's just very simple. He said, if you rise early and you work and you prioritize your life well, he said, by the time everybody else is getting up, you're already ahead in the game. In fact, he said, be a person that everybody around you has to play catch up. I love that. In other words, he said, get started first. He was the first person to teach me it's not the fastest person that wins the race, it's the one who starts first. So work hard, work smart, get up early. It was just an incredible, incredible lesson that I packed away in my life and I learned for myself. And it's just made a huge difference, no doubt about it. The next lesson is think positive. My father loved Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking writer, the power of positive thinking speaker, a tremendous motivational speaker in the 1900s, 1960, 2000. And my father loved him, and he loved his books. And you know that my father put books in our hands starting in the 7th grade and paid us to read books. And one of the first books he put in my hand was The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And I'll never forget reading it and marking it and talking it over with my dad. And then one day he had a great surprise. He said, son, we're going to go to Columbus, Ohio next week. And Norman Vincent Peale is going to be speaking at Veterans Memorial Auditorium. And we're going to go hear him speak. And I just read the book and I was all excited. And I not only went with him up to Veterans Memorial Auditorium the next week in Columbus, Ohio, but I had the privilege of meeting Norman Vincent Peale. My father really understood the power of proximity and how bring your children around around people that have greatness. My friend Diana Kokoska has a great statement. She said, people move toward the conversations you have around them. How true that is. And my father knew that. So again, good books in my hands, good experiences, but to think positive. It was from my father that I basically learned my positive life stance. And a positive life stance is more than just a positive conversation. It's a positive way to live. And the positive life stance just simply says, good things will happen. Good things happen in life. Bad things happen in life. And it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to have good things happen to you. You're going to have bad things happen to you. If I have a positive life stance, if I have a good attitude, the bad things that happen to me won't be as bad as if I have a negative attitude. And the good things that happen to me will be better. So therefore, I choose to think positive. I learned that, and I watched him live it. It was just incredible what I observed from him. And it just allows me to, It allows me to walk in sunshine. And my dad would say, John, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens in you. You don't have control of the outward circumstances, but you do have control of your inward spirit and your inward attitude. When I wrote the book, The Winning Attitude, one of the first books I wrote, really it was I think maybe it was the 6th or 7th book I wrote, but it was the first book that really sold well. Okay, let's start there. It's the first book that other people were buying beside my family. Let's go there. And when I wrote the book, The Winning Attitude, it was just basically copying all of the incredible positive thinking, positive attitude stuff that my father had given to me. Just incredible teaching. When I wrote the book, How Successful People Think, it came out of a conversation with my dad about how he thought and how he chose to think on the right things. When I wrote my first book, Think on These Things, it was out of Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, the things that are good, right, pure, think on these things. It was ingrained on me to think positively. And I look back at my life now and I say, my life was incredibly, unbelievably, beautifully changed because I chose the right attitude. And by the way, your attitude, your thinking, my father would say this all the time, is a choice. It's a choice. So the attitude that I have today, whether it's positive or negative, I chose. It wasn't something that, my boss put on me at work. And, if you had to live with my family, or if you had to work where I worked, or you had to live in the location I live in, you'd have a bad, no, it's a choice. It's a choice. And we get to make that choice. Isn't it amazing? Some of the most important things like positive thinking and attitude. In fact, I wrote a book called The Difference Maker. And the whole thesis of that book is that attitude isn't everything, but it's the main thing. And I love that. And it's the difference maker. If you have two people that you're going to hire in your company, and both of them have the same experience, pretty much the same skill set, but one has a great positive attitude and the other one has a very negative attitude. This is an IQ test. Who are you going to hire? You're going to hire the person that has the positive attitude. It's that all things being equal, if you and I are on the very same level, all things being equal, if you have a great attitude and I have a poor attitude, all things being equal, when somebody has to choose one of us but can't choose both of us, they'll choose you. I'll get left out every time. Why? Not because I lack the ability or the talent or the experience or the skill. No. You had a better attitude. It gave you a step up on me. And my father knew that and understood that and practiced that. Oh, we lived in an incredible positive attitude environment. And my father had it to the day that he died. Literally, a couple years before he passed away, he looked at me, he said, John, we were having a lunch. He said, John, what was he, 96? He said, I've been thinking about my life. He said, I think my greatest days are still ahead. As a man thinketh in his heart, my dad would teach me, so is he. It all begins there. Another lesson my father taught me, this one's huge also. Wow. This is a faith lesson, okay? Is my dad just taught me to put God first. And, one of the things that we were paid to memorize as kids, Scripture, and one of the first things I was paid to memorize was the Ten Commandments. And I can still remember sitting together in old family gatherings and standing up and quoting the Ten Commandments. And my father loved the commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Just put God first. Matthew 6:33. Seek first God and his kingdom, and all of the things will be added unto you. Now, I know this is heavy faith for some of you, but just hang on with me just for a moment, because there's an incredible principle that I learned out of it. He just basically said to me that God is your creator, and God created you for greatness, and he knows what's best for you. Now, here's the question. If God created me for greatness, he created you for greatness. He sure did. Whether you believe in him or not doesn't matter. He still created you for greatness. And if he created you for greatness, and he gave you a purpose that would help you be great, He said, doesn't it make sense the person who put it all together for you is the person that you should know the best, because the more you hang with them, the more they'll help you fulfill that purpose and greatness within you. I love that. So he said, put him first. And what you'll find is that if you'll put him first, all the other stuff that you need in life, you'll get. But if you put everything else first and not God, you'll leave out of your life the most important relationship that you could possibly have. Now, I could go so many ways with this incredible principle. There's a tithing principle. Again, whether you're a person of faith or not, there's a tithing principle that 10% of your income goes to good things, charity, God, faith things that are upbuilding to other people. And so he taught us to tithe, with the promise that gives us in the scripture that if you'll put him first financially, if you'll donate to good causes, not only your money but your time, etc. else, what's the promise? That he'll protect you, and he'll keep you protected, and that he will pour out a blessing. In fact, the scripture says, God says, test me in this, put me first financially. In fact, it's the only place in the Bible where God says, test me. I mean, usually when you test God, it's not a good thing. It's kind of like, I'm not sure you're right on that one. I'm going to push you a little bit. But on this one, because money is so important to all of us, he said, if you just put me and my cause first, he said, then I'll open the windows of heaven. I'll pour out a blessing for you that you won't be able to even to handle. He just basically teaches us, put God first financially, and all these other things will be added to you. And my father understood that, and my father lived that, and my father taught that to us. If you talk to my brother, you talk to my sister, they would tell you that incredible principle of God first in your life has just given us incredible blessings. What blessings we don't deserve, blessings that we certainly didn't earn, blessings that surprise us. Why? Because God understands that if we put him first and seek him first in his kingdom, then he is obligated as God to take care of all the other things in your life. It was an incredible, incredible principle that my dad taught me. Let me give you another one. My father, oh my goodness, the lessons that he taught me. He taught me to walk slowly through the crowd. I shared with you that my father was a college president, and he would make daily walks across the campus just to see the students. He would time his walks with the time that kids would be out on the grounds. Classes would be dismissed. And he would walk across the campus, and I would walk with him many times. And it would take him sometimes 30 minutes to walk a couple hundred yards. Because every student, he would stop, and he knew them all by name. That was another thing he taught me, to remember names. That's another story, another lesson. But he would call them out and call them by name and say, how are you doing? How are your classes? Are we helping you? Is there something you need me to do to help you? And just he would offer his hand to help them. He would sometimes stop and pray with them. He was interested. How's your family back home? Are you okay? And they in fact, when the reason he walked slowly through the crowds is because whenever he was with people, they looked at him waiting to see if he'd come by them, because they knew they were going to get a dose of encouragement in their life. Today, if you would talk about this to the students at that campus, they would tell you one of the highlights of going to Circleville Bible College, that's what it was called then, it's a higher Christian university now. One of the highlights was having seen Dad on the campus walking through the people, because they knew that it was only a matter of time till he was going to come by again, and he was going to encourage them. And so walking slowly through the crowd is a lesson that I just learned. He said, just touch people, just touch them everywhere. Always touch people. And again, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I learned that from my dad. Now, let me give you one more maybe lesson. I don't know if I have, maybe one, perhaps two, but maybe one more. This one is my father taught me to trust and obey God. And he said to me, John, what you have to understand is that God knows what's best for your life, and his ways are higher than yours, and so you have to have faith and trust in him to take care of you. And he taught me that great principle that when he asks you to do something, do it, obey him. And he's always taught me that when he asks you to do something, sometimes it doesn't make sense on the front end, but he said, do it anyway, just do it anyway. And he taught me the great principle that obedience is understood only on the back end, not the front end. After you obey God, all of a sudden you say, oh, I see it. Oh, my goodness, I had no idea. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Just on the back end, on the back end. Just obey him. And you'll see God's hand in everything. I love the statement of Spurgeon. It says, God is too good to be unkind. He's too wise to be confused. If you cannot trace his hand, you can always trust his heart. That's what my dad taught me. Trust and obey God. I kind of want to stop here just for a moment to share with you that I've given a couple lessons of faith again, and it's possible that you're not a person of faith, but you are really interested in having a relationship with God. You just haven't had anybody show you how. Well, I'm your friend. My name is John. And if you'll go to maxwellfaith.com, you'll watch me share with you the 4 pictures of God, which basically help you to see God as he really is, because the moment you see God as he really is, not as we think him to be, you'll fall in love with him and want a relationship with him. So if you go to maxwellfaith.com, I'll share with you the 4 pictures of God, and then our team will get to you. They'll reach you. And if you decide to begin that relationship with God, we've got some free resources, no strings attached at all, just free resources. We want to give you a study guide, and then I have a special surprise for you. But if you decide you really want to make a relationship with God work, or you maybe have seemed far from him, you kind of like to get close to him, just you go to maxwellfaith.com, and I think it'll kind of maybe start you on a beautiful spiritual journey. Well, it's obvious that I'm going to do 4 lessons on tributes to my dad because I'm not even quite halfway through, but I promise you we'll put them all in 4, and you'll get all the lessons Dad taught me, helped me to live. Hopefully they'll add value to you. So this was lesson number 2 on tributes to my dad. Next week, lesson number 3.
Thanks for being with us today on the Leadership When It Matters the Most program. I hope John encouraged you in your leadership just like he encouraged me. Our goal in this time of crisis is to come alongside you, add value to you so you can multiply value to others. If you go to johnmaxwell.com, you'll find free resources, tools that will help you lead in these very unique times. You'll find our podcast, John Maxwell Leadership Podcast, Minute with Maxwell, a daily word that John will bring to you, as well as our leadership blog. All of those resources on johnmaxwell.com.
You've got to work the talent you have. If you're given a lot, you're expected to produce a lot. And he would teach us the parable of the talents. And talents are different. They're varied as far as types and sizes. But he'd say, whatever God gives you, that gift, that talent, that skill set that you have, whatever it is, he would say you've got to manage it well. You've got to work it. You've got to build it, multiply it, use it to help people. And it was an incredible teaching in my life. And what my father did is he helped us find our strengths. This was way before Marcus Buckingham and Strength Finders. No. This book wasn't even written. But my dad knew that where our strengths were, those were the gifts that God gave us. And he also knew that where our strengths were, that should be that those strengths fit our purpose in life. And he very early looked at my brother Larry and helped him get started in the business because he had business gifts and a business mind. I can remember him telling me one day, he said, John, he said, I don't think you're going to be like your brother. Well, of course I wasn't going to be like my brother. My brother, throughout school, had part-time jobs. By the time he was 16, he had money to buy his own car. I didn't have any jobs. All I was doing is playing games and having friends, and I didn't want a job. It interfered with my all of my friendships. And so but I was good with people, and I can remember my dad said, "John, I'm not sure what you're going to do, but you need to work with people. You're good with people. People like you. You like people. So let's do something in the people business." My sister, who's a nurse, had a desire to learn about medicine. My father was very wise. He said, "Okay, let's find out what you're good at now, and let's manage it well, and let's practice it, and really see if this is something that you're good at, because you want to always stay in your strength zone, not your weak zone." And so Dad really kind of gave us a head start. We had a head start over a lot of kids because he already had us programmed to find our strength. And it was interesting. He would say, "And when you find your strength, don't do anything else. Don't get distracted." He was kind of a one person, one thing I do kind of a man. And so when he'd find somebody that was really smart, in other words, they could do a dozen things well, it kind of always feel sorry for him, because he thought, now which one are they going to pick? Because he wanted us to focus, pick one rabbit, stay right in that lane. So, but he taught us to steward our gifts. Another lesson, huge lesson that we learned from my dad, was to live a generous life. I shared with you in the last tribute lesson, my father taught us about tithing. And that's just a great principle. Again, whether you're a person of faith or not, if you set aside time and financial resources to help people and give to others, it's an incredible practice that will benefit others, but also benefits you. And so my father was very, very, very generous, and he did much more than tithe. But that's how he taught us. In fact, when we were kids, I can remember when we got $1 allowance as kids. And he would give it to us in dimes. You know why? He'd give us 10 dimes and say, "Now, let's talk about this. What do we do with these 10 dimes?" And we'd pull out the first one and we'd say, "This is God's." He said, "That's exactly right. First 10, God gets." And my brother, one day, when we went to church, and on the way home, my brother looked at Larry, looked at Dad and said, "Dad, I didn't give a dime in church today." And Dad said, "You didn't?" He said, "No." He said, "I gave a quarter." And I said, "Well, that's wonderful, son. You gave a quarter?" Now, my brother would be at that time, 7, 8. He said, "You gave a quarter? That's wonderful." He said, "Why did you give a quarter instead of a dime?" And from my brother's childhood lips, he said, "Dad," he said, "God's been good to me this week. And I just felt that I wanted to give him a little bit more than what I usually do." Well, my brother gave a quarter that day. But God has blessed him as a businessman, and throughout his life, he's given millions of dollars to people in need and causes that are worthy. And he's a river. He's not a reservoir. He doesn't hold his resources. He lets them pass on. He learned that from Dad. In fact, after my father passed away, my brother, being the businessman, went and began to look at all of his financial records. And my dad kept very good financial records. And he began to, just kind of make sure everything was in order. And he called me on the phone and said, "John, I've just spent a few hours going through Dad's giving and records." He said, "It's pretty amazing." He said, My father never had a lot of money, but my father was extremely good with money. So we never had needs because he managed money very, very well. And he had an income level that he needed to have to take care of all those needs, and then everything above it, he wanted to be generous and give to causes that were very important in his life. And so he had annuities. He was always talking to us, as he grew older about it. He was, had an annuity here, he had an annuity over there. And again, he never made a lot of money, but my brother called me on the phone just after he passed away, and he went through his books and said, "John," he said, I've just gone through Dad's records, and I believe Larry said that just in annuities alone. This isn't other giving. This is just in annuities. And of course, he had annuities with some of these nonprofit organizations, so that financially he received a little bit of benefit from that money until he died. Then, of course, they got all the money, but they got all the money. But he had given $294,000. Just in one area of his giving. That's just one area. That isn't all of his giving. That isn't even the majority of his giving. And he just taught us to be generous. You know, it's that principle of my hand clenched tight. If I'm not a generous person, and I'm holding on to everything I have, and I don't want anybody to have it, and I don't want to lose it. Oh my, I have a scarcity mindset. Well, the good news is if I hold it in my hand, I'll probably keep it. But the bad news is if something comes by my hand that could resource me or add value to me, supply me with things I need, because I am so tight and so stingy and so scarcity mindset, I won't open up my hand to receive more that I could have because I just have to hold on to what I have. And so think about it like this. If you have a clenched fist in your mindset, all the blessings that come by, you can't open your hand, because you open your hand, you're afraid you're going to lose what you got. But instead of a clenched fist, if you just have this right here, you just have this mindset, it comes in, it goes out. What I've been given, I should pass on. I'm a river, not a reservoir. God will only give to me what he knows will flow through me. Now, if I have an open hand, guess what? When the blessings come by, the opportunities come by, I have a hand and fingers. I can take some of those. But when I take them, I don't take them to keep them. Remember this: it's a catch and release program in giving. Just like you catch and release for fish, when it comes, you catch it and you have it and hold it, and then you prioritize it. And where's it best going to go, and then you release it. My father taught me to just live an incredible, generous life, and I'm just grateful for that. Wow. Another thing Dad taught me was to give God the credit. What he taught me well was the fact that that God is the source, and he taught all of us as children that every good and perfect gift comes from God. And so that you have to understand that I'm not the source. God is the source. This is a total different mindset. And the moment that I understand that, I now realize that he gets all the credit. This principle was taught to me greatly by my father and then by my mentor, Fred Smith, who one day when I was 34, 35, I was pastoring, had the 10th largest church in America, just a kid. And so he spent the weekend with me, and we had Sunday lunch after all the services were over. And he sat down with me at the Brigantine Restaurant in La Mesa, California. And he said, "John, I want to talk to you about your gifts, the gifts God has given you." And he said, "This is a life-changing lesson." And he taught me the fact that the gifts that God has given me are greater than me. He said, first of all, they're not yours, they're his. They're called gifts. You didn't earn them, don't deserve them. God, in his care for you, in his purpose for you, gave you those gifts. He gave them to you. You don't deserve them, you didn't earn them. And by the way, if he wanted to, he could take them away from you. They are gifts. That's why they call them gifts. And he shared with me that since that they are gifts, I was like my dad taught me so I was to steward them and manage them well. And that's how I would multiply my gifts, by stewarding them and managing them well. And then he said, "John, when people come to you, and they'll tell you you're amazing because you are amazing because you have these gifts," he said, "I want you to understand you're not amazing. It's your gifts that are amazing. They don't realize it. They're complimenting you because they don't separate you from the gifts, but they should." Because he said, "I know you, and you're not that good." And so they see the gift activated in your life, and they think, "Oh, you're amazing." He said, "John, you're not amazing." In fact, he said, "You're one step from stupid. I'm one step from stupid. We're all one step from stupid." He said, "It's your gifts that are amazing." So he said, when people compliment you, realize what they're really doing is they're complimenting God. They're seeing God work in you through the strengths and the gifts that you have. And so he said, when they compliment you, pass it on to him. Don't try to hold it. Don't try to say, oh, well, yeah, I guess I am amazing. No, don't do that. What you keep, you lose. So just pass it on. And even to this day, when I speak and I'm done and thousands of people have heard me and they're on their feet giving me a standing ovation as I wave to the crowd and go off the stage, I look at God and say, they're applauding you. They're not applauding me. I just happen to activate the gift that you gave me. You just always understand he's the source. Here's what I want you to know. If you know he's the source, you'll always give him the credit. The moment you get confused and think it all begins with you, you'll start wanting credit for yourself, and that just causes all kind of leadership train wrecks. Give God the credit. Another thing that my father taught me to do was just to love people. And in all the lessons I'm giving you, they're all products of loving people. I mean, when I talk about adding value to people, that traveling the high road, encouraging others, the things I'm giving you here, walking slowly through the crowd, live a generous life, all these lessons that I'm teaching you right now from my father, they really are, bottom line, all about loving people. Loving people. And so my father lived it and did it so well. Let me give you another lesson my father taught me, and that was to love and read God's word. Okay, we're on faith, but I've got something really good for you. If you're not a person of faith, you hang with me here on this, because I got something I want to share with you that really help you. Now, my father read the Bible every day. In fact, he read through the Bible, hang on to your seatbelt, 87 times. I'm so amazed by that. Trust me, I'm not ever going to get close to that kind of a number. But he just loved to read God's word because he felt that that's how God basically spoke to him. In fact, I've held his Bible where every time he read it through, he would make another mark and date it. And on the inside, the front it's a tattered Bible, but boy, all the times that he's read through the Bible. Now, you say, well, John, I'm not a person of faith. How does that fit me? Well, I can tell you how it'll fit you. I can tell you exactly. Let me just say something about God's word. Whether you're a person of faith or not, it works. And it'll work in your life. In fact, I'm going to give you the proverb challenge, okay? Proverbs, a book of wisdom written by Solomon, has 31 chapters. Not big chapters. I don't know. How long does it take you to read a chapter? A minute? Okay. Short chapters. I would like to give you the proverb challenge, whether you're a person of faith or not. Doesn't matter, because these principles work. I would encourage you to spend 1 month, 31 days, taking and reading one proverb a day. Just one. A minute, 2, max. You're done. I'm going to make you a promise. If every day you'll read one proverb for a month, 31 proverbs in total, I promise you, if you'll read it, and if out of that proverb you get a good business thought, or a good life thought for living, or a good leadership thought, or a good relationship thought. In other words, as you read it, if there's something you read and you say, oh, that's good, that'll help me, just kind of mark it. Here's my promise. In 1 month, you will have more thoughts, ideas, principles in leadership, life, business, relationships. In 1 month, by reading one proverb a day, it'll be the most productive idea, principle month that you've ever spent in your life. I guarantee it. I know that for a fact because I've been given the Proverbs challenge out for, maybe 3 decades, and I've had many people come back to me, people that weren't even of faith. They didn't even have a Bible. They had to go get them a Bible, okay? And by the way, if you go get one, go get the Message. It's a paraphrase. It's easier to read. Get the Message. And they said, and then they didn't even know where Proverbs were. They had to, go find Proverbs. It's kind of in the middle of your Bible, okay? But just start reading it, and it will. I promise you, it will change your life. Change mine. It will change yours. Another lesson my father taught me is to be intentional. That's where my book Intentional Living comes from. My father realized again that good intentions had to be turned into good actions, and so most people, they don't lead their life. They're not intentional. They accept their life. And when you accept your life, you don't get the best that life has for you. You've got to be purposeful. You've got to be willful. You've got to be focused. And one of the principles, one of the things Dad taught me is that every night he would, just on a 3x5 card, he would write down the 3 or 4 most important things he needed to do the next day. And he would put it he would put it on his desk, and the next morning he would pick it up and put it in his pocket, and he'd just follow those 3 or 4 things that he needed to do that day. He was intentionally, he just understood. He said, son, if the night before you think through your next day, he was always preparing. When I wrote the book, Today Matters, or Make Today Count as it's called today. When I wrote that book, I talk about the fact that we're either repairing or preparing. If we don't live today right, if we're not intentional on today, if we don't prioritize today, what we do tomorrow is we repair what we didn't do yesterday. We're in a repairing mode or lifestyle. But if we prepare, if we do live intentionally like Dad did, and every night kind of get your list so you're ready for your next day with your priorities, if you prepare, you don't have to repair. But I can tell you, you will repair if you don't prepare. That's just an absolute fact. And I learned that. I learned that from my dad. Just to live intentionally in my life. I just love that. And I wrote a book on it. And I learned it from my father. Another lesson that I learned from Dad was to see the best in others. How many times my dad would say, John, there are basically 2 sides to every person that you know. And then he'd say, there's 2 sides to me. There are 2 sides to you. And he'd say, John, you've got a good side and you got a bad side. And you got this side of ideals and dreams. And then you got this human side that falls way short of those ideals and dreams. He said, so when you look at people, what you look for, what is what you'll see. So if I look at you and I look for your faults, guess what? I'll see your faults. I'll see the downside of you. And if I see the downside of you now, he said, what will happen is what you look for is what you see, and what you see is how you treat people. Wow, this is incredible teaching. This comes from my dad. That's why I'm giving a tribute to him. That's why I'm passing it on to you. This is life-changing stuff. And by the way, I'm just going to stop and say, I hope you just aren't with me watching this and learning these lessons by yourself. Think about parenting for a moment. Now, this is on lesson 3 of tributes to my father, so I'm a little late, but these are the kind of lessons you need to sit down with your children and watch together. I mean, take it home with you. Sit down and say, you know what? For 30 minutes, 32 minutes, we're going to listen to John just teach some lessons from his father, and let's learn them ourselves. This is a time to share with others. My dad was a master at that. If he went to a conference, he'd take me out of school. In fact, he'd tell the teacher, I'm going to educate him today. And he'd sit beside me, and we'd take notes together. What did you learn, son? And he understood to expose me to these great principles. These 4 lessons now, 4 lessons on tribute to my dad. Oh, my goodness. Don't hold them for yourself. Teach them to your staff. Sit down and watch them together. Make sure these are life-changing principles and lessons that will just absolutely do the best. And so my father said, John, see the best of others. In fact, here's what he would say. If you see the best in others, you'll bring out the best in others, and you'll receive the best from others. Just as if you see the worst in others, you'll bring out the worst in others. Yeah. What you see is what you get. And what you see is based on who you are. We don't see people as they are. We see people as we are. We put them through our grid. We don't see life as it is. We see life as we see ourselves. The first person to kind of fix is me. If I can get me right, I'll see you right. If I can't get me right, to be honest with you, I'll probably see you wrong. If I can't get me right, I'll see life wrong. So my father just said, John, you remember the three things that he gave me? I gave in one of my tribute lessons, believe in people, value people, unconditionally love people. That's all in seeing the best in people, because when you see the best in others, you immediately begin, this is huge. You begin to immediately bring out the very best in others. And I just love that. I just think that is so helpful. Let me give you another one. We're doing so well today. I'm moving through these pretty good, and I'm feeling good because I won't get it done today, but I'll get the lessons done in 4 tributes to my dad. That's for sure. My father was so good on teaching me to maximize my gifts. I taught you in another tribute lesson that he taught me to steward my gifts, which was to manage them. Managing your gifts by doing the things that you do well consistently and not working on your weaknesses. Maximizing my gifts is a whole different level that my dad taught me. And he basically taught me that, as Stephen Covey said, make the main thing the main thing. My father, in maximizing my gifts, basically said to maximize your gifts, you have to practice your gifts. Now, I'm going to give you an incredible formula, so get ready to write this down. To maximize my gifts, I have to practice my gifts, because how do we get better? We get better by practice. And we get better by practice if we're practicing our strengths. Because, practice doesn't make perfect, but it does make permanent. And so if I'm practicing my strengths, I'm permanently making my strengths bigger and better and maximize them. So he'd say, first of all, practice your strengths. Okay, so try it. Go out and do it. Secondly, evaluate what happened. When you finish, don't just finish and say, well, I'm done. No, you're not done when you're done. What that means is now you have to evaluate what you've done so the next time you can do it better. So you practice it, that's action. And then you evaluate it. Okay, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? Where do I need to improve? What could I change? That's where you get feedback from others. Because sometimes I can't see it myself. I'm too close to the forest to see the trees. So you practice it, and then you evaluate it. And then number 3 is you improve it. And you improve it by saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do next time that'll make this just a little better. And I can promise you, you become a genius one tweak at a time. Nobody makes a giant leap forward. No one is an overnight success. It's like one person said, all my life I've worked hard on being an overnight success. No. It's one step at a time. It's one tweak at a time. And to maximize your gifts, you practice them, you evaluate them, and then you improve them. And as you go into the next time, you have a game plan. You're still doing that strength that you have, that gift that you have, but you're doing something a little bit different that's just going to enhance that gift. So every time you do those 3 things, you practice, you evaluate, and then you improve. That is absolutely huge. Last lesson my dad taught me that I'll give you today, then we'll do one more next week on Tribute to My Father. We'll finish these 29 lessons. The last lesson I'm going to give you today was my dad just said to follow God 100%. Again, now I'm on a faith one, but just hang on with me. Just hang on with me. You just need to be a 100%er, okay? And one of my father's favorite verses was, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then he'd also say, when you do that, you love others also, as you love yourself. But God was first, and he said, be 100%er. It's the advice John Wooden shared with me when he was coaching UCLA, and his college basketball players at practice would be a little tired, and they wouldn't be giving him 100%. So he'd go over to them and say, I know you're tired. Maybe you had an exam last night. Maybe your girlfriend broke up with you. Yeah, coach, bad night. I'm not giving you 100% today. And then Coach Wood would say, listen to me very carefully. I know what you're thinking, and I got to help you with your thinking. You're thinking, I'm only giving 70% today, but that's okay. Excuse me. I'm only giving 100% today, but that's okay because tomorrow, or giving 70% today, but that's okay because tomorrow I'll give 130%. He said, you can't give 130%. You can only give 100%. So realize what you don't do today, you can't make up tomorrow. If you give me 70%, 30% is gone, lost, left on the table. You never can get it back. Make every day count. That's how my dad felt in his relationship with God. Just give him your best shot. I would also encourage you, as I talk about some of these principles and lessons, some of them are about faith, and it's possible that you would like to know God or have a relationship with God. No one's maybe ever sat down and just shared with you how to do it. Here's what I want you to do. Go to maxwellfaith.com. In fact, do it now because the lesson's over. maxwellfaith.com. And why I want you to do that is I will share with you there the 4 pictures of God, and I will share with you how you could have a relationship with him. And if you do that, we also have some free materials. Proto says if you just do the top 2 things, you'll get an 80% return of everything you need in life. And that was a life-changing principle, but it was built on the fact that my father also believed that and lived that. I think the difference between Dad and Pareto was the fact that if you go to the bottom 20% on your list of 10 things, my dad would have said, don't even touch it. Don't even worry about it. The return is too insignificant for you to give it any time. Another thing that my father taught me in priorities that was just absolutely huge was to look at my day, and he was the first one that helped me understand that I can't be 100% all day. In other words, we're human. We get tired. We need to take breaks. We mentally get fatigued. And so he said, John, you can't get up in the morning and go till night and be always on. You can't be 100%. You got to have a few times where you say, wow, I just need to catch my breath. So he said, you don't have to be 100% on all day, but you do have to be 100% on in the things that are important. Now, this is right back to priorities. So look at your list. You maybe have, 7 things to do today, 7 definite things that you need to accomplish. Now, if you've got 7 definite things that you need to accomplish, what you know and I know is they don't all hold equal weight. Pareto, again, would say, what are your top 20% of those 7 things? I don't know, what are maybe 2 of those things that you really need to make sure. Now, my father would say, John, pick out your times that you're going to be 100%. And he said, nothing is worse than needing to be 100% because the meeting is crucial or the conversation or whatever your event is, and you not being there. So he said, don't have to be 100% all day, but you do have to be 100% at the things which are really, really important in your life. That was life-changing to me. Life-changing. Because as I look at every day now, I ask myself, where are my 100% times? Where do I have to be all in? And I pick them. And then I make sure that I can hit the ball at that time. And then maybe I don't have to be 100% when I'm having lunch. I don't have to be all in then. So then you get your breaks. But know that's all about prioritizing. That's all about energy. That's all about excellence. As you know, if you hear me teach, I talk about the 3 R's, what's required of you, what gives you the greatest return, and what gives you the greatest reward. Kind of want to line those up. When what is required of you is also the thing that gives you the greatest return, which is also the thing that gives you the greatest reward, you are in your sweet spot about priorities. Since I'm talking about Dad, when I grew up, there was a little plaque on the wall that I just saw and read hundreds of times growing up. It was just always on the wall. And the plaque was just very simple. It said, only one life, it'll soon be past. And only what's done for God will last. Now, my father never sat me down and said, let's read this plaque together. Let me explain it to you. He just had it on the wall. And every day as a kid, I visually would look at that, had it obviously memorized, knew exactly what it said. But what I didn't realize is that every time I would look at it, every time I would again be reminded that there's only one life, it's going to be passed, and only what you and I do eternally for God, faith, really is going to last. It was one of the great eternal principles that as a kid I grew up with. And here's what I know. Those words are more meaningful today than they were when I was a child, and they are more true than they were as a child to me. My father, by example, by plaques, by his words, just taught me how to prioritize my life, because he knew, and I know, and I want you to know, activity is not necessarily accomplishment. Your goal isn't to be busy. Your goal is to be effective. And that's based on your and my ability to prioritize those things in our life. So that was a lesson that Dad taught me, and it was, oh my gosh, it was such a good lesson. Another one that Dad taught me was that not to give up and not to give in. My father said, I have never known a successful man who quit his way to the top. I love that. And when I think of my father's perseverance, my father, as I've taught in another lesson, was very consistent. My father was very focused. As I just taught a moment ago, my father prioritized well. My dad had no quit in him. He didn't. What he set his mind to do, he stayed right on track. And it was something that I watched in him, and it's something that I admired, because what happened is, because he had no quit in him, I watched my father handle difficult days and adversity in a very successful way. And what that did for me is, when I began to be, as a leader, hit with the tough times, the one thing that never entered my mind was to quit. Maybe it entered my mind that I ought to create and find a better way. Maybe it entered my mind that I needed to have some people come alongside and help me so that we could maybe together get through a dark time. Maybe it entered my mind that I needed to ask some questions so that I could better be ready to stay in the game. But it never entered my mind to quit. Why? Because I never saw my father quit. I saw my father understand that at the end of the day, the person that wins is the one that stays in the game. Now, that had such an impression on me as a kid. Now, you have to go back to 1972, 73. Now, I'm pastor. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm still living out the lessons that Dad taught me and was teaching me at that time. And I'll never forget, I got into a real tough stretch at my congregation, and to be honest with you, it was wearing me out. And I, for the first time, I was 28. For the first time, I thought, maybe I ought to quit. Maybe I ought to just let this one go. And then I remembered my dad and his example. One of his favorite expressions is just keep on keeping on, son. Keep on keeping on. There was no quitting, keep on keeping on, that's for sure. And so I can still remember the day in my office I picked up the old thick Webster's Dictionary. Now you can talk about, hey, those were the days. Hey, remember the days when you had encyclopedias? Remember the days we didn't have all this technology and all the wonderful advances we have today? So I took my old Webster Dictionary and I went to the Q section and I got to the word quit. And I took my scissors and I cut it out of the dictionary. I literally, in fact, I don't have that old dictionary today, obviously, but boy, I wish I did. In fact, I did. I'd bring show and tell and I'd show you, because at the age of what would have been the age of about 27, 28, I just cut the word out of the dictionary and I just basically didn't even recognize it as a worthwhile word. Where did I get that? From my dad. He was a 100%er. No quit in him. When everybody else was kind of considering it, My dad was head on, game on, staying right with the task. That is a tremendous lesson that I have in my life today, because leadership gets very difficult, and there are times when you just say, wow, I'm worn out. Now, my father did teach me to take a break. He did teach me to rest. He did teach me that sometimes you got to back off enough to kind of refuel and renourish yourself. But there was no quit in him. I'm grateful for that lesson that he taught me. Another lesson that I learned from my father, my gosh, what a huge lesson this one was. This one stayed with me throughout my life. Well, they all have, but my father, he introduced me to How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. As you know, my father picked out books for me to read when I was a kid. And if you've read How to Win Friends and Influence People, I assume you have. I mean, hello. Can you really go through life and not read that book? Because it is, to me, the relationship Bible. Simple, basic principles on relationships. And Dale Carnegie said the sweetest sound to a person's ear is the sound of their name. And so Dale Carnegie emphasized the importance of remembering names. And my father was really good at it. And when I was a junior in high school, we went and took a Dale Carnegie course on remembering names. I'll never forget it. It was my dad and I took it together. And how they had us back then, I don't even know how Dale Carnegie teaches it now, but how they taught it back then was that what you did is you put a visual object on their head that would relate to their name. So just for example, if I met you and your name was, let's say, John Water, okay? Well, then what I would do is I would put water right on top of your head. I would put a visual picture of water right there. And so I would visually see water on your head so that when I saw you next, I would call you John Water. I remember one time, speaking of water, I was going to my new church in Lancaster, Ohio, and had hundreds of people to learn their names pretty quick. And I met the first day I met a wonderful couple named the Hargis family. And soon as they said Hargis, I grew up near a lake that was called Hargis Lake. And I thought, oh man, I got this one nailed. And so I put a lake right on top of their head. And the next week when they came back to church, I was so confident. I just reached out my hand and said, well, how are Mr. and Mrs. Lake today? I'll never forget, they looked at me and they looked at each other. And of course, immediately I realized, oops, I missed that one. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. What was your name? They said Hargis. Of course, then I laughed. I told them the Hargis Lake story. So it's not a foolproof, but here's what I do know. My father impressed upon me that the name is the sweetest sound of a person's ear, and that immediately when I get it, if I can visualize something and put it on top of the head so that I can remember their name. When I was pastoring in my last congregation in San Diego, California, a large church, I knew over 3,000 people by name. In fact, I would tell them when they came to church, now you've got to go back to 1991, 2, 3. Those were the Polaroid days with cameras. And I had, I don't know, maybe every week 50 to 60 hostesses running around the campus. And they all had a way to identify themselves as a host or a hostess, and they had a Polaroid camera. And I would tell first-time people, just let them take a picture of you. And if you'll let them take a picture of you, when you come back next week, I'll call you by name. Now, this was massive. And that's what they do. They would take pictures of our new people. And on Monday morning, by 10 o'clock in my office on my desk would be a big key ring with a bunch of Polaroid pictures that are punched out all in that ring with the names of each people at the bottom of the picture. And during the week, I had a 5-minute break, I'd pull over that ring and with all those pictures, and I would look at the picture, I'd look at the name, picture the name, and I would memorize those names. And this just caught the attention of people. I'd say two things. I said, if you'll let's take your picture, I'll do two things. One is I'll know your name when you come back, and number two is I'll pray for you. And I would look at those pictures and I would pray for those people. I remember one Sunday, I was out in the lobby area, and there was a new couple who'd been there the week before, and I went up and I called them by name, and the wife just jumped up and down. She was so excited. I thought, oh my gosh, why are you so excited? She said, I just want to bet. I just want to bet. So I bet my husband $10 that you'd remember our names because you said you would last week. And he said, no, he won't remember us. And she said, I just wanted to bet. Thank you for remembering our names. And I said, is that true to him? He said, yeah. He said, yeah. We had a bet. And I said, then you need to give her $10. And I'm here to witness this. And so he got a $10 bill and he handed it to her. And I said, now, my name is John and we teach tithe to the church. I need $1 from that profit you made. And we both laughed and we both howled. But my dad just taught me, to remember names. And that's another way of telling a person that you just greatly, greatly value them, remembering names. Another lesson my dad taught me, there's so many good lessons. As I look at my list, and honestly, as I've started the list, I've thought of a couple more. But as you know, again, I said this, I know at least in tribute to my father, lesson 1, maybe in the other ones also. These are lessons I wrote down on the last day I was with my dad when he was alive. And he couldn't respond to me at all, so I sat at his bedside with my iPhone, and I literally began to write down lessons I learned from Dad. And when I would learn them, I would just speak to him. I'd say, Dad, here's another lesson you taught me. And I would talk to him about that lesson. And we had the most beautiful, intimate father-son time together. So that's where all these lessons, come from. In fact, I'm reading off of a list here, but really, when I look at this thing, if I just take you over here for just a second, Dad, July 1, 2000. Thanks, Dad, I learned from you. These are all my lessons right here. They're just right here on my iPhone. And, of course, I'll keep them there and go over them like I'm teaching you that. Now, by the way, I make my dad sound like a saint, but I tell you all the good lessons. But he also taught me some bad lessons, too. One of the things I learned from my dad was to love ice cream. Oh, my gosh. My dad loved ice cream. I love ice cream. We've had many great conversations where he took a quart and I took a quart, and we talked and ate ice cream. So he wasn't a total saint. He also, I learned impatience from my dad. Oh my goodness. Patience was, I didn't teach you anything about patience here in this lesson. My father, I'll tell you how impatient my dad was. This is fun. I'll just tell you this for a moment. My sister Trish, this was when he was probably 92. Took him in his car to a place to, like a Jiffy Lube place to get his car taken care of. And so they were sitting down, and after about 30 minutes, he looked at Trish. He said, aren't they done yet? And she said, well, they'll be done pretty soon. And about 40 minutes in, he said, Trish, they ought to be done by now. And she said, well, let me go check. She went and checked, and she came back and said, they said it's going to be a few more minutes. And now, Dad, he's up. He's pacing the floor. He's looking at his watch. He said, as if he had someplace to go. And finally, about 50 minutes in, he looked at her and said, okay, I got an idea. She said, what, Dad? He said, let's go buy a car. Let's go buy a car. She said, what do you mean? He said, I can buy a car quicker than I can have this car have a lube job. He said, and she said, Dad, you can't go buy a car. We got to wait on this car. Now, my father, he's ready to go buy a car. Let's just go buy a car. If I have to wait this long, I might as well go buy me a new car. Then I won't need the lube job on it. So he wasn't a saint. I learned to also speed with my dad. I mean, I'm sorry, but he was his impatience. He taught me to even cut in line a few times. So he wasn't a saint, but the lessons I'm giving you were life-changing lessons to me. So let me just give you, I've just got a couple more, and then I'll finish this thing up. My father, this was huge. My dad taught me to do my best always. And if you're writing it down, just take the word always and put it in capital letters. My father felt that if it was worth doing, it was worth doing it right. And he would often say, John, if you don't do your best, two things happen. One, you have to go back and do it, or two, you didn't go back and do it. And you shortchanged yourself and you shortchanged the people that you were trying to help. He said, don't go that way. He said, why would you go do something twice when you can do it best once? And so and again, being a person of faith, my father would believe that excellence began because that brought glory to God. If you travel, especially in Europe, you look at some of the great old buildings, they'll have the expression, year it was built, and then for the glory of God, for the glory of God. And they basically try to live their life and build their buildings as a masterpiece of excellence to honor their Creator. And my father just believed that with all of his heart. And so therefore, whenever we did something, we knew that we didn't do it half-heartedly. We didn't tiptoe through the tulips. We had to be all in, dive in, and do our very best. And that is something that I'm so appreciative of in my life today. I can still remember when I was a young leader, after I, went into my first church, and I realized that I was a naturally a kind of a connecting, charismatic kind of communicator, and I realized that I was good at it. In fact, I was speaking in a farming community with only 30 people, and to be honest with you, those farmers were just glad to have a little time that they weren't doing chores. And so they loved me. And I realized very quickly that I could get up and I could just maybe study for 30 minutes and I could preach a message and they would all be happy. And so I asked myself, well, what am I going to do? Am I just going to do that and kind of wing it and get passing grades? Or am I going to really work for it? And I went into a few months of, do I wing it or do I work for it? And I'm so glad I went back to my father. And I realized his teaching stayed with me. I can't wing it. I've got to do my best. So I literally started writing every sermon out so that I would be clear in my thinking and so that I wouldn't repeat myself. And I started that habit. For 25 years, I wrote out every sermon, word for word. It was an incredible discipline. And it also helped me to realize I've got to give best effort and I've got to get best return for this. My father really developed that excellence line. And he always said to me, son, he said, remember this, you set your own bar of excellence. Don't let someone else set it for you. In fact, he said, if someone else sets the bar of excellence for you and their excellence is higher than yours, then you've set the wrong bar. He said, you should have such a high expectation of what you do that no one else has that high expectation. So you not only want to meet expectations, you want to exceed expectations. I've done teaching on exceeding expectations. You see, only 15% of the people even meet expectations, only 5% exceed them. And my dad understood that if you exceed expectations, if you do your best always, you'll set yourself apart from the rest of the crowd, and that's absolutely life-changing. It's huge. Wow. Dad, I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful for you, for all that I learned from you. And then he taught me to grow and better myself. He taught me that unknown to me at the age of, or when I got to the 7th grade, of him putting books in my hands and paying me my allowance to read books. Life-changing for me, life-changing for my family. Basically, he realized that if he could pick good books and I read them, it would have a positive effect on my life. And he was the first one that put me on an intentional growth plan. And the only guarantee that you and I are going to have a better tomorrow is the fact that you and I are growing today. If you and I are not growing today, what would make us think that tomorrow has greater possibilities? You don't go into possibilities, you grow into possibilities. You don't go into opportunities, you grow into opportunities. It becomes the natural thing to a person that keeps learning and growing, expanding and stretching. And it was my father that just so beautifully walked into my life and taught me that great lesson of just to grow to better myself. Be enthusiastic. Be enthusiastic. My father lived enthusiasm. He was a ball of fire. That's why when he died on the 4th of July, I thought that's when he should die. He should die on a day when doing fireworks and just celebrating because my dad was a fireworks celebrator guy. My dad wasn't into music very much. He didn't really know music. He wasn't he was kind of tone deaf and didn't sing very well. But I remember one day when he was a college president and he was in chapel and we sang the doxology, and it's just one verse, praise God from whom all blessings flow. You probably know it. And my father just loved the way it just sounded good to my dad, and I'll never forget. He looked at all of us. He said, "Oh, that was so good." He said, let's sing the second verse." Well, there's no second verse. There's only one verse. So my daddy wasn't deterred. He just said, "Okay, then let's sing the first verse again." And I think that day we sang the first verse 5 times till it satisfied Dad. And he just was contagious with his enthusiasm. When I did the memorial message for my dad, I talked about his enthusiasm. And so I'm going to just read something that I shared at his funeral, because my dad, when he was 85, wrote this. It was called Celebrating the Senior Years by Melvin Maxwell. And what does he say? How do you celebrate your senior years? Number 1, stay alive and don't quit dreaming. Find new ideas and set new goals. Now, he's 85. Number 2, don't give over to defeat and discouragement. Things are not as bad as you think. Number 3, never think that you're too old. Moses was 80 and led 3.5 million people out of captivity. Number 4, never think you've lost your usefulness. Your years have given you both experience and wisdom to share with others. Number 5, never think that you're not needed or important. Everyone you meet needs a smile and some loving words. Number 6, never stop trying. Persistence always wins. Your candle may be burned down, but not out. Don't complain because you're gray or bald. A lot of people haven't lived that long. Number 7, keep your spirit of praise and constantly think about the goodness of God. Your attitude rather than your aptitude determines your spiritual altitude. Number 8, love God more each day. He is with you. He has no losers, just quitters. You are near the winning line. Just hang on to get there. Number 9, try to leave a memorial that will live on and on. Love, kind words, thoughtfulness, faith, vision, a charitable gift. Well, that was my dad. That's who he is. That's who he was. The last lesson I'll give you, thanks for being with me for these 4 lessons on tribute. But the last one is that my father always taught us to express gratitude to God and express gratitude to others. Always, every day. Grateful to God, grateful to others. He lived it, he showed it, and it's me. It's who I am. In fact, I did this tribute to my father because I'm very grateful for my heritage. It's obvious, I'm sure to you, it is to me, that I won the parent lottery. I didn't choose my parents, I just lucked out. I just happened to get the right ones. And what he taught me lives in me today. In fact, after I taught one of the lessons, Andrew, who's in the studio with me, does such a great job helping me with all this technology. Andrew, as I was talking about tribute to my father, Andrew, remember you told me, you gave me another title that you said, I know what you ought to call this series. And what was it? What was it?
Lessons my father lived that live on through me.
Lessons my father lived that live on through me, right? Oh, I like that. Lessons? What is it? One more time.
Lessons my father lived.
Yeah. So he lived them. Lessons my father lived that live on through me. Well, that's why I teach those lessons. In fact, my dad, he died, but he'll never die. In fact, at his memorial service, his grandchildren stood up and taught lessons that he taught them. They've got many years to live. And then his great-grandchildren shared things that they had learned, principles, life-changing lessons like mine. And those grandchildren are just in their teenagers years. Think how long my dad will live because those principles just live on in others. As I finish my time together, I've shared with you a few of his principles and lessons that are about faith. In fact, this one is express gratitude to God and express gratitude to others. And perhaps as you've listened to these lessons, and some of them are faith lessons, you've had a desire maybe you'd like to know God. Well, if you would, I can help you. My name's John. I'm your friend. And if you just go to maxwellfaith.com, you'll see me teach the 4 pictures of God. Most people don't know God because they have a wrong picture of him. And in this teaching, it's just a 10-minute teaching. I share with you how you can have a good picture of God, because once you see him as he is, you'll want to be his friend. You'll want him to be your friend.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.